Canes fans, how you doing? This is Peter Ariz here. Excited to bring you this week's preview episode. Of course, it's FSU week. Canes coming off a tough loss last week, but it's rivalry week. So, of course, we have to get you covered with the opposing writer and insider, Michael Langston of Warchant.com. So excited to have him on the podcast later today. A lot of bonus content for you fans who are just used to the normal back and forth about the teams. Mike does a really good job covering recruiting. Obviously, Miami, Florida State have a ton of crossover in guys that they're on. So Mike brings us some updates about some guys who are going to be there on campus at Florida State. He says it's going to be an absolutely loaded weekend. And of course, they're on campus for Florida State, but tons of Miami targets who want to see the Canes in person, and these guys need to put on a good showing. These guys meaning the staff, of course, and make sure the guys are prepared to have some things, some positives to take away from this game, win or loss. So we'll get into that. D Money had some work stuff come up, so he was not available tonight, but hopefully we'll be bringing you some info, maybe a bonus episode tomorrow with D Money. But we'll be doing the live show tomorrow evening, as always, at 8 o'clock. So stay tuned for the link, which I'll drop that tomorrow. The official CanesInSight watch party is, as every week, is at Titanic Restaurant and Brewery, right across from campus, right across from Mark Light Field. So excited to meet some of you guys out there. We had some people out there last week who I got to see, and was great to see the fans out there. And it wasn't the result we wanted, obviously, on the road against NC State, but appreciate everyone who supported the watch party last week, and hopefully we get some more of you guys out there next week. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. We do the live shows every week. Whether it's Thursday night, we tinker with some Saturday morning pregame shows. Basketball season's here, so I might be doing some postgame stuff. I did one for the Monday night game against NJIT. We have UCF on Friday, so stay tuned for some content that I have coming there on the website, CanesInsight.com, completely free. Sign up. The forums are where it's at. Get all the latest up-to-date news on the Canes. Football, baseball, basketball, you name it. It will be on CanesInsight.com. So without much further ado, Mike Langston, Warchant.com, brings us the latest and gives us the intel on Florida State, Miami's opponent this week. All right, Canes fans, as we do every week here on the CanesInsight podcast, we bring in the opposition. And this week, we have my friend Mike Langston from Warchant.com. Canes fans, you guys know his face. He's been in the business for a long time. You guys have read his work, and still operates very much in the recruiting space. So you'll be, I'm sure, seeing this guy's updates as we wind down here for the recruiting stretch. But Mike, I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Pete. I'm glad to see you. Pete, I've known Pete for a while, so it was a pleasure doing this for Pete.
Yeah, Mike. So, I mean, look, it's been a fun season up there in Tallahassee, right? The expectations were sky high before the season. Obviously, had that tough matchup with Clemson, the letdown game, so to speak, against Boston College. But other than that, has been relatively smooth sailing for the Noles. How would you assess the first 9 games?
Yeah, it's been really good for them. I mean, I think the thing with FSU is each year we saw them kind of graduate to another level where they're learning how to consistently play the same way. And I think you see a lot of their games. If you watch a lot of them, they're very similar. Some of the games, even the games they struggled, the BC game, they got up 31-10. And that was really the only game where it was kind of like an avalanche of bad stuff happening, and they just had to hold on. But the rest of the games were kind of similar. Clemson got off to a halftime lead. I think it was maybe 17-14, and then LSU got a 17-14 lead. And then the second half, they really just they spot the things they're not doing right, and they just take over. And when they have those moments, they really hit it. And then but there's been times where they're still growing, as Mike says, like the climb over here at FSU. And so I think they're still waiting for that game where they play a full game. They haven't played a full game where we've seen it in spurts. So I think overall they've certainly done what they wanted to do. And they knew last weekend there was going to be a challenge because they didn't have Keon Coleman, they didn't have Johnny Wilson. So it was kind of adjustment they haven't had to deal with in adversity. So I think overall they're pretty happy with where they're trending as a program, but they also know there's still a lot of growth left in this program.
Before we get into this weekend's matchup in specific, I wanted your take from your perspective on the development of Mike Norvell as a coach,
Hmm.
right? And it's interesting, right? Because Canes fans are kind of taking solace in the fact now that Norvell had his struggles in year 1 and 2,
Yep.
right? 4 wins, 5 wins, had his very obvious struggles. There were calls for him to be fired, but
Yep.
then comes back with that 10-win season last year. You see the momentum that he continues to have in the transfer portal in the
Hmm.
offseason. Did you see any changes in him, whether it's recruiting style, whether it's coaching stuff, whether it was something with his staff? I mean, or was it just a matter of time before his plan came to fruition?
Yeah, I think with recruiting, it was more where he didn't have the same advantages that Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal had. Mario's really good in state. He was always been well known. Kids know him, coaches know him, high school coaches know. Same with Billy Napier when he coached at Clemson. He was always in Florida, so he knew the area. Mike and them were kind of a new breed where they had to go out there and show it on the field. Is your product going to be better? And I think it just materialized where they worked in their culture. They had to change their culture. What they do when he first got there was a very soft-minded, weak-minded, frail mentality of what they were, and it wasn't like to the FSU standard that I think even Canes fans grew up, seeing. And so he had to build strength up and build brotherhood and build accountability to what they do. They had the Jacksonville State game, which was on memes and everywhere, where that was just a fun time. And that was like probably their lowest moment, but it was also one of their best moments because the next week they played North Carolina, beat them, and then had that game against Miami. But I think really just each week growing and doing things, a little bit better. It wasn't about, hey, we're not going to get all this back in once. It's kind of just you know taking different spots of your team and growing them each week. And whether that's from because there's a lot of people that year, the next year or following year, they wanted to go in the portal, and he ultimately stuck with Jordan Travis. And there was a lot of people that said, hey, go get us a quarterback, man, because I don't know if this is going to work. And then he's like, no, that's our guy. He stuck with him. And so that's kind of been Mike's thing of guys that fit what they do. They've had some guys that ended up being out of the program, but that just weren't fitting what the accountability was of what he said. And he's even told him, like, this is going to be the hardest thing you do, but the guys that fit that and the guys that worked and wanted to put in the work, I think it's really just the work they did. And I think early on recruiting, it was relationships. And then as the relationships was always good, but then when the product started catching up with the relationships, that's when they started taking off.
Yeah, I think that right there is what Miami fans are hoping for, right? They were hoping for it this season, and there's still some time left for them to salvage it, of course. But that on-field product is what's going to take their recruiting. As you mentioned, Mario is always going to be one of the best recruiters in the country, but you
Yep.
have to match what you're selling with what's going on the field.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and your culture too has to be in there. You have to have guys that all believe in what you're doing. You can't have 50% thinking, "Hey, we're going to do this." Like, you sense it, about the second year that, FSU had a really bad beatdown when they went to Miami. I think Norvell had COVID and they went over there, they got slaughtered. They came back, and then they just kept building, that culture of this is the expectations of what we are, from an FSU's perspective, and I think that's what Miami's trying to do. But it takes time. It's not something that's I know. I know even FSU fans, they first started, it was a dreadful 3 years to get to that point, and I know it's a struggle for Miami fans when they go through it, but it's a process to it, and that you have to get guys like Cam Kitchens, guys that hold people accountable every week when they play, and those are the type of guys that you want to have a full 80 roster of. You'll have
Yeah.
guys that all, and once you get that, I think the rest just takes care of itself. The talent takes care of itself, and I think the other thing Mike and them have done is the development they've done with players, not just from the portal, but their kids they get there. They've done a great job developing them, and with the portal, they just the way they recruit the portal is basically they find spots that are holes in their roster, and they really just attack it. They knew with the wide receiver position they needed just a can't miss guy, and they got Keon to add in with Johnny, and just a great mixture of there's a certain criteria they look for each kid, and it comes to, and a lot of it resounds around team, like do is winning the most important, and that's the thing with these
Right.
kids, is like it's very team oriented, which is not what we're living in the world
Yeah.
with NIL, but that's what you have to build your team around, is just guys that buy into what your product is and what your culture is.
Yeah, and look, it's going to be interesting moving forward up there. Obviously, they have been so portal reliant. Miami has been too, but FSU's been so successful that I know Mike doesn't want to continue to build the foundation of the roster with guys
Right.
like that. But with their success, they can cherry pick. They can really sell their success with guys in the portal, and they're going to have a pick of pretty much whoever they want, I would say, at a lot of spots. But looking at this matchup, Mike, obviously Miami has been sputtering offensively, coming off that loss last week, and then you have the Clemson win a couple weeks
Hmm.
ago with Van Dyke out, and then the overtime win against Virginia. Um, there's talk about a potential quarterback switch. Mario is not going to give anything away. If you know
Yeah.
Mario, he's
Yeah.
never going to give anything away. And whether it's a piece of information as big as a starting quarterback, or who the backup punter is, right? So he he
Right.
he doesn't give stuff like that away either way. But how do you think Florida State is approaching this week? I mean, do you think they're expecting a Tyler Van Dyke to be the starting quarterback this week?
I think they're preparing for all angles, where it's a Jacory, coming in there and mixing in some runs, or having either Emery or TBD. I mean, my personal thing is like likely TBD starts, and then kind of we'll still see how it goes. That's kind of my perception. But I think FSU's preparing for kind of all three, because you have to, because you just never know. Obviously, they're aware of everything, I'm sure, that's going on with the offense, and so you have to prepare whatever you're seeing, and they've had to deal with that a few times this year, of teams they played where they had multiple quarterbacks. So I think they're preparing for kind of just both of them and what they do, and strengths they know. Obviously, they know Emery really well, being from Milton. He's visited FSU before, and
Yeah.
they know the type of skill he has. They know he's a really good, pocket passer. But I think they know just kind of each one. I think they'll study each one, so I think they're preparing probably for all three.
Yeah, I was going to ask you as a follow-up question, just out of curiosity, because I
Yeah,
didn't remember how much Florida State recruited both Emery and Jakari, who's also a kid in the region,
right.
right? And I didn't know if you had any, remembrances of
Yeah,
them
I
from
mean,
their recruiting time.
a funny thing with Jakuri is I evaluate him like probably like 11 or 12 times, because Lowndes in Valdosta is like basically an hour away from me. So, and I
Right.
always enjoy going to see games in Georgia, because they're just a different like level of how much they
Hey,
appreciate it. So I would see Jakuri a lot, and Jakuri was just such elite runner. But the struggles I've seen with him is kind of the stuff I also saw, with Lowndes. But I saw those guys a lot. Milton, Emery, though, on the other hand, he actually grew up a Seminole fan, so he was kind of hoping FSU would push late. Miami made him more of a priority. That was kind of one where if FSU push, who knows? It could have went the other way. But Yeah, they're both great talents in what they do. They're just different in what they do. I think Emery is just a really good pocket guy. He's not when he played in high school, he didn't seem like the moment was too big for him when you watched him play. Just a guy that welcomes the pressure and a really good kid. Talked to him several times, and so it'll be interesting to see if both of those guys get in there, or even one of them, and see what happens. Because like I said, that's kind of a storyline that writes itself that he grew up liking FSU.
Listen, it'll if he plays, if Emery plays, it really comes down to how much Shannon Dawson, Miami's offensive
Yeah,
coordinator, trusts him, because there were limited downfield passing opportunities against
yeah,
Clemson. He made the throws when he needed to,
right.
but like you said, that's his bread and butter, is as a pocket passer.
Hmm.
He's we've likened him, a couple of us on the Canes Inside podcast, to a Brad Kaya, in
Hmm.
the sense that he's not going to be a very mobile guy, but he can really pass the ball
Yeah, he
efficiently
sees the field
down the
well. That's what he did at Milton. I think that's what attracted Miami to him. Is just the way he sees the field, and so yeah, it would be interesting. And like there's risk no matter which way you go. With those three, whether it's a combination or if it's one. So I'm sure it'll be interesting. It's going to be exciting, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of, I guess, their plan is once it gets out there and it's 3:30 and we see what's on the field.
Couple more things here before I let you go, Mike. Jordan Travis and Keon Coleman, their connection, right? Jordan Travis has taken a huge leap, each of the last couple seasons, but the confidence in that relationship that he has with Keon Coleman
Hmm.
has, to me, taken his game as a quarterback to the next level. And I think that is a matchup that Miami is very concerned with.
Yeah, they've worked a lot this summer. You see a lot, and Jordan talks about it a lot, where he's worked a lot with him. He wanted to build a connection with him. And Jordan's evolved so much as a passer. I remember, that year in the Jacksonville State year. I mean, he couldn't even, you know, not just see the field, but just there wouldn't be a lot of passes in the middle of the field, and it would just be a lot of edge stuff where you go out there to edge or he'll run. And then once they started getting these receivers in, I first noticed it when they played LSU in New Orleans in that game. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I mean, because you finally got receivers and he's trusting. And so Tony Tokar's Mike Norvell did a great job of just, making him trust what he's seeing and still believing in him. Because I mean, this is a kid that his brother played baseball at FSU, Devin Travis. He was a big FSU fan, so I mean, he was sticking with it, and he just stuck with it. It's one of those guys that sometimes just sticks with it and it goes with it. And then with Keon, he's probably one of the best I've seen as far as in a while as an overall prospect that just does a little bit of everything. I think a lot of people, when they watched him at Michigan State, they just thought he was like a jump ball guy. But then you watch him and his routes and in and out of routes and just his ability catching traffic and then his ability after the catches. It's been pretty special. But I think they're also trying to not lean on him too much where they want to get all the different parts together on the field. But yeah, Keon is definitely a difference maker that's really taken them to another level this year, I think, with their program.
From a Florida State perspective, again, great start to the season. Home game this weekend, 3:30, ABC. Miami sputtering, like we mentioned. Everything seems to be in their favor this weekend, right? But it is a rivalry game. Other
Yes.
than the aspect of it being a rivalry game and anything can happen, what would be your concern when you look at this matchup, from the Florida State side? What would a potential weakness for Miami to exploit be, this weekend?
Yeah, I think of me is I'm born and raised in Tallahassee, so I've seen all these rivalries. So I know every game. I don't care who is the favorite. Anything can happen where you have weaknesses. Certainly, I think a guy like Jacoby George is a problem. Just FSU's number 4 in the country in pass deficiencies, but that guy is certainly he finds ways getting open. He's a guy that certainly be a problem. I think Xavier's also kind of falls in that category where he can do some things. I think getting off to a good start is really, for me, the concern because I think that's a positive one way or the other. It's like if it's FSU gets off to a good start, it's like, okay, Miami, it's going to be trouble, man. If they're up, like kind of like last year, they got up, they never let them breathe, and then it was a runaway. But then, so I think really, containing the running game with Mark Fletcher, I think Mark does a really good job running between the tackles, and then I think the explosive plays really that's kind of the big thing. I don't think Miami can go consistently. You're talking like 14, 15 play drives, but I think they can hit big plays. And so I
Right.
think the big plays is kind of probably I think will be a concern if you had one going that game of what they can hit. But that's kind of the thing on paper for me.
Well, Miami was hitting them early in the season. Obviously, showed that in the
Yep.
A&M game, and it's been a nightmare for Canes fans to watch offensively. Now, last thing here before I let you go, recruiting wise, this is always a huge weekend for whoever is the host team. Biggest visitors in town this weekend, and then matchups that you'll be watching, recruiting battles, I should say, that you'll be watching here down the stretch when it comes to Miami and Florida State.
Yeah, so I've done several interviews today about the recruiting weekend and did a lot with the on three guys. And I told them this, and I'm not kidding. I've been doing FSU. I've been working Warchant for like 12 years. I've done recruiting for rivals and different things for like 23 years. This is the best weekend I've seen as far as the overall talent that I've ever seen for FSU hosting a weekend. I think there's going to be 8 or 9 5 stars that are on campus. Some big names, a lot of top 20, 25, prospects. I think, guys like Wardell Mack, committed to Florida, 4-star DB, he will be there. You got a lot of top tier guys that are 2025 class, like running back Osman Kroma from Lee County, 4-star running back. Alvin Henderson's another one, just visited Miami kind of recently. I mean, the list is kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous. I could sit there and go on about,
Listen, Canes fans, you can, I'm sure, find it on War Chant
yeah.
this weekend. So
Yeah, five star, five
stay tuned
star,
for that.
5-star wide receiver Cam Coleman will be there. 5-star Jeremiah Smith, who Miami fans know really well, he will be there to watch. So that just kind of gives you an idea, like when there's 8 or 9 5 stars, and I can't count how many top 4 stars. It's going to be over 100 recruits there. So yeah,
Well,
it's
it's a lot for Miami on the line too, because a
yeah,
lot of these guys they're recruiting,
yep.
and yes, it's FSU weekend. They're going to be, there in the atmosphere, and I'm sure if you ask them right then and there, they would be Knowles on the spot. But Miami's got to keep it competitive from the recruiting
Yeah,
standpoint, even
yeah. I
if they
mean,
don't win this game.
yeah, because the majority, a lot of these recruits are going to be 2025 that I've looked through that I've gotten confirmed. A lot of these guys are 2025, and good portion of these guys are from South Florida. And I think Jabari Brady is going to be there, 2026 top receiver. I think is one of the best receivers in 2026. And so there's going to be a lot of guys that yeah, FSU's hosting them, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of guys that are kids that are watching, whether at home or they're visiting this thing that they need to see some product from Miami. They want to see like, hey, where just give us something. Give us a little bit that we can grasp onto that, hey, this is what they do well, and just have them something. I don't think it has to be like extremely competitive. You just need to show something that they can grasp onto. I think a lot of times fans get caught up in like who wins or loses, and in some cases recruiting it helps, but I think really recruits just want to see what your growth is as a team, and I
Right.
think that's what a lot of recruits that like Miami and recruits that are considering Miami, they kind of want to just see kind of, hey, where are they at right now?
Yeah, everyone has since the beginning of the season has asked us, the Canes guys, how many wins does Miami need to land XYZ recruit? And it's more than the wins and losses. It's
Right.
you got to give them positive
Yep.
things to hold on to, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, listen, it was awesome talking to you tonight, Mike, previewing this one this weekend. Look, a lot of Canes fans have they're down after the recent weeks, but Saturday morning they'll wake up and they'll think that the Canes are winning this one by 3 touchdowns. So like we said, it's a rivalry game
Yeah, it
and
is.
anything can happen.
Yep.
Miami's defense, I think, will come out with their adrenaline going. they have been a really, really solid unit all season long. They can make some big plays.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I like what they're doing defensively. I think overall they're not as big in the middle. So what they're doing is they're creating pressure with Gildry. They're doing a lot of blitzes in different ways to certify pressure. Ruben Bain's been phenomenal. I think Ruben's had a really good year. I've known Ruben really well. So I think their defense is certainly, if there's anything you're going to take away from the season, whether they win or what happens in this game, is they've certainly shown the defensive recruits like, hey, this is what we can be, and this is what we can be as far as pressure and getting pressure and creating problems. So I think the thing you just want to see every week is growth. And I know it irritates a lot of the Miami fans because of the inconsistencies that they see from game to game. The main thing is all you look for is each week is a little bit of growth of where you're going as a program, because it's going to take some time. I know my fans don't want to hear that, but FSU's been through that. A lot of programs have been through that. That it is you want to see growth. As long as you're seeing growth, then you can buy into that. Now, when you stop seeing growth and it's just pure,
stagnant. Yeah.
stagnant stuff, then that's when you start to have to think about, okay, where's this going?
Look, not to keep going back on it as we do every week, but things would look a lot different for Miami if they knelt the ball against Georgia Tech as well.
That's
So
very true.
the
That's very true.
the positivity meter would be a lot more, looking up.
Yep,
So,
I agree.
but Mike, thank you again. Canes fans, again, you'll be reading a lot of this guy's work down the stretch, I'm sure. Yep. Warchant.com on the On3 Sports Network. Mike, appreciate the time once again.
Anytime, Pete.